Hi, Champion Summary Review here. Watch out and take care. Today we will be sharing a 2022 supernatural horror streaming television series titled Archive 81. There are total of 8 episodes and all will be covered in this video. Please enjoy, like and subscribe to this channel to support. Dan is a conservator who is asked to work on a high-8 tape. He restores it and watches the introduction to Melody's PhD dissertation in 1994 about an apartment building called the Visser. The tape is for Virgil Davenport of LMG and Virgil invites him to fix the rest of the tapes. Though he finds it strange that Virgil somehow knows that Dan's family died in a fire when he was young, he accepts. As the tapes are too fragile to be moved, he goes to live in a research campus owned by LMG. Virgil gives Dan a bracelet that can summon emergency medical staff as there is no internet or cell reception and Dan has a history of mental health issues. Melody looks for Jess, a kid from the building that she claims was taken. As she is fighting with the guards, Dan's father arrives and tries talking her down. Dan is left shocked about his father's connection. It is revealed that Dan is being watched. Dan calls his friend Mark from his cell phone in the woods, realizing that Virgil searched him out intentionally. Mark convinces him to keep working on the tapes to understand why his father was involved. Jess introduces Melody to more of the Visser's residents, including Beatrice and Samuel, who asks her out. Dr. Turner leaves a message on the answering machine for Melody, revealing she is a patient of his. She deletes it. While looking for cell service, Dan sees a child in a red jacket outside the fence who flees. He finds a secret area in the research facility, and Virgil tells him that Dr. Turner may have set the fire that killed Dan's family. One night, Melody finds many residents including Samuel in the basement, worshipping a statue. Mark reveals to Dan that Melody is alive and did not die in the Visser fire. As a baby, Melody was left in a church by her mother Julia Bennett. She was then raised in an orphanage run by nuns. She would also have blackout spells. Dan taps into the security cameras and begins mapping where they are. Jess is experiencing seizures so she goes to Dr. Turner. Jess' mother believes that Father Russo will rid Jess of her seizures. Mark visits Melody in present day. She says that the tapes have all been faked and Mark realizes that she is just impersonating Melody. The real Melody is dead. In the past, Melody finds Jess tied to a chair in her apartment while Father Russo tries to perform an exorcism. Samuel bursts in and throws Russo out, promising to get Jess proper help. Father Russo warns Melody to leave while she still can. Dan has been dreaming that he can talk to Melody. Dan begins losing time when he sees Melody. Melody interviews Mrs. Wall and sees the statue the group was worshipping in Mrs. Wall's apartment. Mrs. Wall calls them a cult and shows Melody her pendant. Melody sees a disturbing image in it. Wall gives Annabelle a jar of black paint her sister, Eleanor, used for her work. In the present, Dan tells Melody who his father is. She gets upset. When she vanishes, a journal is left there. Written by T. Bellows, the journals reveal the code to get in the locked room off the church. Once in, Dan finds a paper Dr. Turner wrote about cross-dimensional bridges. Mark is asked by Virgil to spy on Dan. At Mrs. Wall's party, Beatrice performs a séance to contact Melody's mother but senses another force. Dan's computer freezes then and Melody appears. He explains that she died 25 years ago. She disappears and Beatrice recites pieces of conversations Melody and Dan have had, including the one that just happened. Overwhelmed, Beatrice begins tearing her own face off. In Melody's apartment, Annabelle claims there is a person in the dozens of paintings she just made with Eleanor's paint. Beatrice warns Melody, don't let it out. Dr. Turner tells Melody that he tried to sign her up for a study researching people with sensitivities, whom he called Baldung, but she was rejected. Melody discovers that Father Russo died after going to a mysterious meeting the night before. She discovers that Father Russo had been investigating the Visser and that Samuel has multiple fake identities. In Father Russo's research she finds descriptions of a cult called the Baldung Coven and an image of a statue like the one she saw in the community room. The statue depicts a being called Kaelego, who is both god and demon. Melody realizes her mother's ring has the Baldung sigil on it. At the art show, she sees that Annabelle's work is covered in mold and the paintings are all of the same woman. She confronts Samuel when Chris, a junkie, falls from the building dead. Watching Melody's footage, Dan sees Virgil share a look with Samuel on the street immediately following Chris' death. Virgil tells Dan that Samuel was his brother and that he thinks Melody murdered Samuel and may have set the fire that killed Dan's family. Mark tells Dan he found Thomas Bellows. Thomas was hired by Virgil to digitize VHS tapes. He experienced delusions in the research facility and died after leaving. Dan breaks all the cameras in the facility. Melody learns that Annabelle had a psychotic break and injured 2 people at the art show. She discovers that Mrs. Wall is poisoning people with mold and goes to inspect the source but is caught by Samuel. Dan discovers that Thomas was seeing the same face in the tapes as Dan. Samuel takes Melody to the ritual room. The song she has been hearing is actually a prayer, and her feeling ill when she hears it means she is the right one. Samuel shows Melody the snuff film, which is a ritual that was performed in the building the Visser was built on top of. Melody realizes that Jess is the sacrifice to hold the new world. Dr. Turner shows up to have Melody committed to a psych ward. A demon tries crawling through the screen to get Dan, so he smashes all the screens and tapes. He discovers a room similar to the one in the snuff film and is knocked unconscious. Dan wakes up in his apartment, confused and without his mobile phone. He goes to confront Virgil at LMG but is threatened with legal action to stop him from continuing his investigation. Mark fills Dan in about what he has found regarding the Voss Society and William Crest. Dan realizes that the woman Annabelle was painting is Iris Voss. The episode then transitions to 1924. A woman named Rose is being interviewed for the position of maid in the Voss household and witnesses the arrival of the Kaelego statue. Iris leads a group in prayer to Kaelego. Later, Rose finds Iris bloodied after a miscarriage. The mold appears in the mansion and Iris sees it as a sign from her god. A Baldung witch, who had attended an earlier party at the mansion under a false name, attempts to steal the ritual book but Jonah Voss shoots her. The Voss family plans to perform the ritual but Lucas Voss leaves because he cannot reconcile himself with human sacrifice or the potential consequences. Iris proceeds with the ritual, which Jonah films. This is the origin of the snuff movie William Crest saw. When Iris slits Rose's throat, a mysterious light appears which disrupts the film, ending the recording. Mark and Dan find Annabelle, who says that Melody has been waiting for Dan in the otherworld. Steve reunites Melody with Annabelle in the psychiatric facility, but he won't let Melody leave for her own safety. She escapes to save Jess. Annabelle gives Dan a box of tapes that Jess left for him. The tapes show Melody returning to save Jess. Melody convinces Jess to escape, but Melody is knocked unconscious by John Smith. Samuel and the cult members proceed with the ritual and use Tamara in place of Jessica. Iris appears in the portal, which Sam and Melody enter. Jess returns with her camera, but runs out of the building as the ritual ends in flames. Davenport declines to help Dan find Melody. Mark and Dan decide to try the ritual themselves, but Bobby stops them at gunpoint, revealing herself to be a Baldung and Melody's birth mother. Bobby sends Dan to the otherworld where he sees his late family before finding Melody. Dan finds Melody and they make their way to the portal exit, pursued by Kaelego. Samuel appears at the exit, pulling Melody through. Melody and her mother are reunited, and Mark frantically calls for Dan. Dan awakens in a hospital bed to discover the year is 1994, weeks after the Visser fire. We hope you enjoy this video summary. Do remember to subscribe. Thank you.